Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hidden Hockey Podcast again. I'm your host, Matt Gordon. If you're just tuning in, I'm going to give people a few minutes here, but what we're going to talk about today is the 2025 NHL Draft Sleepers. So these are the picks that aren't necessarily the first-round picks. Some people have mocked some of these guys for first-round picks. It just depends ultimately on what your belief is, but it should be interesting to see what kind of players are going to go here in the later parts of the draft. And I'm going to talk about some of my favorite prospects that I think are eligible for this year's draft. I got a list here that I'm going to go through about 30 different players. And if you have any other questions about those players and or players you want me to talk about, please put them in the chat on the right-hand side. We'd really appreciate you guys being able to engage in the content. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So obviously this draft there's been a lot of interesting takes lately about this draft. The commonly held belief compared to what I've been saying in my past videos is that Matt Schaefer is right now the consensus number one across a lot of different ranking platforms. A lot of different independent scouts have Matthew Schaefer at 1, despite the fact that he's injured and won't play the rest of the year. I'm curious to see as to why that is the case. Personally, I have him ranked 5th on my board, but that's an interesting thing there. But there's a lot of players I think that are not being ranked appropriately, and I'm going to talk about those players tonight. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and talk about a few different players here. The first one being Victor Klingcell. So Victor Klingcell had a really good Ivan Holinka tournament. Right now is ranked. Central Scouting's got him ranked internationally at 25, which is an interesting rank for him internationally. I think there is more potential than what a lot of people realize out of him as a player. Yeah, he's a little bit shorter at 5'10 and 183 pounds, but looking at the skill level and what he brings to the table, I think there's a lot more to give with him. I'm going to go ahead and click his profile real quick. Obviously playing at the under 20 level, he's been able to do a lot of different things. You see the rankings there on the right-hand side. Widely considered to be a second-round pick. Some people even have him as a third-round pick. I'm of the opinion that I think he's got the potential to be in the first round. I think, especially with the weaker draft here, a scout that really wants him is going to go out and grab him. So that will make for a really interesting debate on whether or not people really value him at that level. Obviously, you look at the rankings there with Bukala thinks he's a first rounder. Some people are not seeing him at sleeper quality, but if you look at, future considerations, has him ranked at 97. To me, at that point, he would absolutely be a sleeper. Should be really interesting to see what kind of player comes out with him. But he's a great puck handler, really good skater. Again, not the most physical guy, tends to play too much on the perimeter, but there's a lot to like with Victor Klingcell. I'm going to go now into his teammate, who's ranked a few spots under him in the International Central Scouting rankings, and that's Viggo Nordlund. Just recently was named to the Swedish under-19 team playing in a tournament. It's the under-19 Five Nations tournament. I really like his skill set as well. He's similar to Victor in that he's a smaller guy, really good perimeter player, finds his opportunities in the offensive zone, is not afraid to make himself really, offensively available. He just really has a good overall skill set and good potential. Looking at his profile here, he's obviously gotten some pro time in Sweden, which is impressive. He's a late 2006, so he was a week away from being eligible last year. You can see here at the rankings here, he's 28th on European NHL Central Scouting's ranks. A lot of people have him late second, early third, but obviously going and really kind of finding his way at the pro level, still finding his opportunity and where he fits in. But in a program like Skellefteå, they've developed a lot of really good players. It's a really talented group over there. I think Viggo is going to be a guy who a lot of people would want to sneak up on and really take a look at. Now going into a third player that I want to talk about, that's Arvid Drott. Arvid Drott plays for Djurgårdens at the under-20 program. A younger kid in the birth year. He's August 11th. He's a month away from being eligible in 2026. Bigger kid at 6'1" and 187 pounds. Currently, Central Scouting has him ranked 43rd among international skaters. Really has come in at the under 20 level and been closer to a point per game, finding his opportunities in terms of he's a really tenacious player, very good forechecker. Skill set there is, he's anything from, a really good second line player to more of a third, fourth line player if you need him to play that kind of role. You look here, there's a very, varying differences of opinion. 15 is the highest I've seen him ranked in any of these. I'm surprised that somebody has him that ranked that high. I like the aggressiveness in ranking him that high. Personally, I have him ranked in like the 18 to 20 range. But there's a lot to like with his game. He's overall just a really super solid player. Brings good potential, good energy to the offensive game, and he's just got a great skill set. So I'm going to, go ahead and click him in here. So now you can look at his profile here. Obviously somebody who has played now at the under 18 level and has really played well at the under 20 level as well. Been a real leader for Djurgården under 20. Somebody they've really looked upon, with the graduation of guys like Victor Eklund and Anton Frendel, who've gone on to play at the Allsvenskan level. They relied on guys like Arvid Drott and a couple other players I'm going to mention here that are interesting players as well going into this year's draft. But this is a kid who I think if you get him anywhere in the second round, I think you're getting a really good value pick. Third or fourth, you start to roll into the sleeper territory for him. I think there's a lot to like there with Arvid Drott. Going back now on the list, I'm going to route back here. Michael Eriksson playing for the under-20 program in Farjestad, the Norwegian-born kid. He's 2 days away from not being eligible in this draft. So he's one of the youngest players eligible in this draft. Bigger kid. It's he's 5'11". I would say he's closer to probably 6 foot. I'll go ahead and load him up here. Has really proven himself in Sweden now for 2 years. At the under 20 level, has been over a point per game. Will obviously played in the 1A under 20s this year and was very impressive there. And also got some top level action last year at the under 18s, averaging a point per game. So this is a really legit kid. I think his draft profile is really impressive. I think he's flying a lot under the radar right now, just because he is Norwegian. 94th in the ranking for Central Scouting, which is very low for him. I think he's somebody who, in my opinion, I think is a really, really impressive player, and there's a lot more to give with him. Offensively very gifted, a lot of skill. He some really good speed as well. He's not afraid to, burn you on the edges and find his opportunities in those zones. And it should be really interesting to see what his game grows and how he grows into his game going into next year and finding himself at the pro level. Plus, he's got great bloodlines. His uncle's Espen Knutsen. People mainly know him for the reason why we have the Nets in the National Hockey League, because he accidentally took a slap shot, deflected off the defensive stick, and unfortunately killed Brittany Cecil, who was a 13-year-old girl attending her first ever Columbus Blue Jackets game. So not the end of history that you want to have associated with you, but with Michael Eriksson, I think he's a guy who I think is a really impressive player. He's definitely a draftable kid, and I definitely see him going into the second or third round. His teammate, Elias Strome-Vatne, is another guy I'm really interested in. Had a really good under 20 tournament as well. And, averaging a point per game. He's really struggling in the Swedish level to, find himself in the pro game. But Strome-Vatne is a guy who this is obviously his second year eligible for the draft. A really good high-end skill player. Yes, he's shorter at about 5. I think he's 5'10" and about 170. Yep. 5'9", 165. I think he's a little bigger than that. But this is a player with really intriguing potential, really good skill. Has the opportunity to really grow within his game. He's proven it now in Sweden for a few years. Clearly ready for the pro level. Should be really interesting to see where he grows into his game and where he goes going forward. I think there's just a lot to like with Strome-Vatne. Definite overager candidate to be drafted, in my opinion. Moving on now, a lot of people consider this year to be a really weak year for the Finnish players in the draft. A couple guys I wanted to highlight here. One guy in particular is Matthias Vanhanen, another late-born kid. 4 days away from not being eligible in this draft. He is, getting some Liga time, a little bit shorter at 5'9", 160 pounds, ranked a little bit lower. Again, This is a kid who's really done very well at all junior levels here. You can see he's over a point per game at every level he's played at so far. Did pretty well at the Hlinka Gretzky, really managed his game and found himself really to be a pretty impressive player in his own right. And for HIFK right now, he's struggling a little bit at the pro level. He's going to find his game, but it's somebody who I think, despite the fact he's smaller, he's got really translatable pro assets. May it take a couple years for sure. He's definitely a project, but you got to like the playmaking ability. You got to like the fact that he has been as quickly developing as he has been at the junior level. And you can't understate what that does for a player. Moving on here to Benjamin Reutinen. He's another player who I'm really impressed with. This kid, a double overager. Central Scouting was actually super aggressive in their ranking of him. 41 amongst European skaters, which was a big shock to me. I wasn't expecting somebody to like him as much as I have. I featured him on some previous videos of mine in the past on the channel. Widely thought he was one of the better players that wasn't drafted last year and the year before that. I do think this is the year he gets drafted. He's got 18 points in 36 games at the legal level. Also played on the top line for Finland at the World Juniors this year. Averaged about, I think he was 4 points in 7 games, but really played top line minutes with some of Finland's best prospects and looked pretty at ease. So he's found his game a lot, and I think there's a lot to like with him. I think he's definitely somebody who he's already going to be closer to 20 years old by the time he's drafted. This is the last year he's eligible to be drafted in the draft. So there's a lot to like there with a guy like Ben Reutinen, and I think he's going to find his game, and he will definitely get drafted. Do I think it'll be in the 3rd or 4th round? Probably, but he's somebody who I think has got a ton of value and somebody who could probably step into the AHL immediately. Another player I want to talk about here is Owen Martin for the Spokane Chiefs. Just a hard-nosed player, really good checker, finds his game, in the dirty areas of the rink. He's very valuable. At the very least, he's going to be a very good checking line forward for any team that drafts him. Should be really intriguing to watch his game and see his growth in his game. Really like what he brings to the table and what he's able to do as a player. We're going to go here and talk more about him and his game. Ranked 69 among North American skaters. He's this year hasn't really scored as much as I would have thought for him, but his game has been really well-rounded. I thought defensively he's been excellent in the games that I've watched of him. It should be really interesting to see his growth and where he comes into his own. A lot to like there with Owen Martin, and a guy who I think is going to steadily rise up the boards as well. Ben Cavan is another player here. He's a 2007 born kid. Obviously, this year is his draft year. He's been a really impactful player for the Des Moines Buccaneers in the USHL, one of their best scorers, playing along with Blake Solinsky, who is widely thought of to be a top 45, if not top 30 pick in next year's draft, the 2026 draft. This is a kid who he's not the most fleet of foot, but my God, can he score goals? And you look at a player like Phil Kessel, who's made his career on that. Obviously is now out of the league, but Ben Cavan is a guy who I think he doesn't have the skill set of a Phil Kessel, but I think the approach to the game and the way he handles his game offensively is something very similar. He's not necessarily super projectable yet, but a lot of people like his offensive ability, and you can't pass up a guy who can score goals. You have to take chances on guys like that, and if they have the opportunity, they find their way in the National Hockey League some way or some way, shape, or form. Number 10 here, we got Aiden Lane. Aiden Lane, again, this is another kid who right now is on the edges of, some 2nd and 3rd round picks for him. He's found himself at 3 different programs so far this year. Started the year at St. Andrews, which is where Dean Letourneau played last year. He was a teammate of Dean Letourneau's last year. Decided to start the year there. Was dominating too much at that level. Needed to move up. Went to the USHL level to play for Green Bay. Went from Green Bay eventually to go to Brampton once the CHL NCAA agreement was broken. And he's played pretty well for the Brampton Steelheads. I'm going to go ahead and click his profile here. 6'2" and about $190. This is a kid who's still really growing in his body. Again, a really solid player. He's got 5 points in 6 games at the OHL level. Already been a very impactful player. He's going to go on and play at Harvard next year. There should be a lot to like, though, with Aiden Lane and what he brings to the table. He's definitely a guy who I think is finding himself more in some top 60s. But I right now I would have him slated for, closer to like the 3rd, 4th round right now, just based on what we're seeing with Central Scouting. Central Scouting had him ranked 114th amongst North American players. I think that's really low for him. Definitely a guy who has brought a lot of skill and good potential in his game, and there's more to his game than what I think a lot of people realized. One of the leading scorers in the USHL, an undrafted guy in Aiden Park. Aiden Park, again, has been featured on this channel quite a bit. I thought he was one of the better guys not drafted last year in the 24 draft. Aiden brings a whole lot of skill. He's going to go to University of Michigan next year. Just a really great and impactful player. Again, a great skater, very good straight line skater. Just absolutely high motor. Is big workhorse kind of player. At the very least, if he can put some scoring touch together, he's definitely a guy who can anchor your second line. At the very least, he's definitely a third line guy with some scoring ability. There's just a lot to see out of his game, a lot to like out of his game. And, for people that are looking at these overagers that weren't drafted this year, I think he's made a really strong case for himself by adjusting to the USHL level as quickly as he has. There's just a lot to like in his game, and I give Aiden Park a lot of kudos because a lot of kids that don't have, the expectation of being drafted last year, a lot of kids tend to then decrease and not have the campaigns that you would want them to have in response. And Aiden Park has come in and now been a top 5 scorer in the USHL level, which is very impressive considering this is essentially his rookie year at the USHL level. So, he's a guy who's ranked 151 amongst North American skaters. They have him more of a 6th to 7th round grade. I'm personally of the opinion he's a 3rd or 4th round guy. There's lots to like with his game, good skill, a really nice shot. Like I said, though, he's just a checker and he's got a great motor. I think he's a very advanced skater amongst those in the class, and there's a lot to like with him. Another sleeper here is Tommy Lafreniere. Playing for Kamloops. This is his rookie year in the Western Hockey League. He's been very impressive, almost a point per game. But his come out of the woodworks have been super, super fun to watch. This is a kid who's a high energy kid, brings a lot of tenacious, ability to his, in all 3 zones actually. Still finding scoring touch even a little bit at the Western Hockey League level. I think next year, after he's drafted, I think is when your real value is going to come out of him. So he's a guy I think you can buy low and really get a lot out of. 5'11", 170. He's definitely going to be a guy who needs to grow a little bit more. You'd hope to get him at 6 foot 190. Hopefully by the time he's ready to be, playing at least in the pro ranks and, maybe at the NHL level, he gets around 200. But this is a kid who's just a very good all around player. Doesn't do anything overly impressive, but there's no weaknesses really in his game either. So just a very safe pick. I think somebody who I think has just been under-scouted because he hasn't really found his groove in terms of, who he is as a player. He's still finding out, I think, his identity as a player, and there's a lot to like with Tommy Lafreniere. Going into some overagers now. So number 13 here. By the way, these are not ranked based on my opinion of them or anything like that. I just had to put a list together. This was the easiest way to do it. Going into some 05s that I really like. I already talked about Benjamin Reutinen. Another player that isn't getting any really looks on the scouting radar, which I'm really surprised about, is the one Slovenian I have on here, and it's Mark Seaver playing for – right now he's playing at the under 20 level in Sweden. Or sorry, not Sweden, Switzerland for BLBN. This is a program that produced, guys like Ehlers was produced out of here. They've had a couple of different players that have come on and played in the Swiss League as well. A really well thought of program, and he's been a leading scorer now in the under 20 league now for 2 years. This is a kid who I think is finding his game at the pro level. He's playing at the 2nd tier level in Sweden. Just a kid who he's not getting the viewings that one would expect out of him. I'm going to go ahead and look at his stats here so you guys can see a little bit of a bigger kid, 5'11". He's going to probably be around $180 by the time he's ready to go. But there's some really impressive stats here. He played really well at the D1A tournament, 8 points in 5 games. I thought was really impactful in that tournament as well. And the little bit of clips I saw of him. Again, a guy who doesn't necessarily have super high-end game, but he scored at every level, and that's something to give him credit for. The biggest thing I noticed about him is he's a really good skater, quite quick, and he had a really good, playmaking ability along with a decent shot. Just a lot of decent play out of him. I never came out of watching him and thinking I wasn't impressed by him. Is that enough to get drafted? I'm not sure, but at the very least, he should be looked at either at the D1 level for the NCAA. Now that the rule is done, I think he's a guy who is a prime candidate to step into a college program next year and be super effective. Or he could be somebody that, maybe is coming in as a later, comes in as an RFA at some point, makes it into the National Hockey League. He could be a camp invite somewhere. There's just a lot to like with Mark Seaver's game. And because he's from Slovenia, because he's not playing in the most draft-centric league ever, there's just a lot to like with him. I think there's just such an undervalue in terms of, finding guys like this. He's very much a diamond in the rough quality player. Another guy to look at here is Logan Warmald. Logan Warmald is, another shorter guy, really tenacious on pucks, finds the groove, and he just, drives everything, despite the fact that he's a little bit shorter, a little bit lighter. He doesn't play like he's 5'10", 160. I would even think that weight's slightly outdated as well. This is a kid who I think has got a lot of skill. Doesn't really, I think there's definitely some people that need to invite him to their camp. No question about that. I think he's even gotten some camp invites. I'm going to double check real quick here off screen to see if he's ever been invited to a camp. I would assume he has. But if he hasn't, I think this year is the year where he'll definitely get some looks. He's not, which is surprising. He was invited to the U18 camp a couple years ago. Obviously was on the radar for them at one point for Team Canada. So, again, 2005 born. Possible he doesn't get drafted, but at the very least is a very good camp invite potential guy. And then two other guys I want to mention here that are 05s. Three guys actually. Hunter Anderson and Giovanni DeJulian. Both guys are double overagers. It's their last year to be eligible for the draft. Hunter Anderson's dealt with some injury concerns. Came out of the Shattuck St. Mary program. Was teammates with Aiden Park. Hadn't really started the year very well. He started the year actually off until about December or so. Had an injury. But Hunter Anderson is a guy who has scored at every level he's ever played at. Every team he's played for, he's been impactful. A kid from Manhattan Beach, California, which is a very atypical market to be in. Was a Junior Kings player. Went on to play, and he's played on a few different teams here at the USHL. He hasn't really found his groove at the USHL level just yet. You can see here there's still some growth here, but if he can get his groove, I mean, look at what he's done recently. He's had, last 6 games, he's had, looks like 9 points there. 7 points, sorry. And, averaging a point per game, at the USHL level, I don't care what age you are, it is impressive. It's definitely something to look at. And, he's continuing to find his game. He's right now on the edge of me thinking that he will be drafted. At the very least, he'll get a camp invite, though. Giovanni DeJulian is a guy who's going to play at the D1 level. You go on here. I think he's playing for Brown, if I remember correctly. And, Cornell. So 6'1", $160. This kid, he's got to obviously put on a lot of weight. From Vermont, which is an interesting area that doesn't necessarily always breed talent. This is a kid who played at the prep level, has made the adjustment from the U18 and prep level over to the USHL, 29 points in 37 games. I would assume that he's probably going to play another year at the USHL level. He's finding his game, but I think there's still more to unlock with him. Should be really interesting to see where he goes from here, though. I think there's some real projectability within him. Definitely a guy who I think could be a camp invite. Just a lot to really look at and kind of see with a player like him. A couple of the Russian kids I want to mention here. Vadim Dudurov. This is a kid who I want to get more viewings of this kid. I caught him in a really short clip And the thing I noticed the most about a guy like Vadim Todorov is that behind the net, he was an assassin, man. Like when I first watched, a guy like Dmitry Buchelenkov, for example, I originally wanted to watch him to watch Matvei Michkov. Went on to watch Buchelenkov because I liked how dominant he was from below the circles. And this kid's very similar in that regard. I think he's a guy who is finding his game still. He's finding his opportunities here at the MHL level. You look at him and he's injured right now, but he's 44 points now in 33 games, kind of flipped his totals a little bit. But he's been a really impactful player. Like, he's been out for it looks like he's back now. Actually, I didn't notice that. But you look at the MHL level, he's doing damage. Like he's, obviously playing 20 minutes a night, obviously thought of to be a really high-end forward, but despite the fact that he's, Russian and a little bit of an overager, in the clips I've seen of this kid, I think he's a really good player. Obviously, I think if the war wasn't going on, you'd have a little bit more eyes on him. There would be a lot more intrigue around a player like him. I just think that he's just undervalued right now in the scouting community. And another kid who I'm going to mention here is Mikhail Melikov. Was teammates with Ivan Ryabkin for Dynamo Moscow. And, he's a guy who is a little, finding his rank and finding his ability, really dominant as a young player. And then this year, obviously went from the under 18 level and the under 17 level in Russia to the MHL, which for those that don't know about those leagues, it's actually a really impressive jump. And for him to come in and be 27 points in 35 games, there's some growth there for sure. I think there's a really good ability here. As you can see, he's finding his groove here. Like, in the last, look at the last 10 games here. You got 9 points in the last 10 games. For a league that, really for draft eligibles, if you're getting closer to a point per game, you're getting looked at in the draft, and he's right there. Obviously 150 pounds, I think that's an outdated weight. Hard to really get accurate rates on these kids. But it should be interesting to see where his game grows. Obviously a very talented player in his own right, and there's a lot to like there. A couple more Norwegians I'm going to get into. One guy here, Romeo Edvardsen Sorensen. He's so niche. He doesn't even have a height and weight on here, but playing for Mora. A lot of Norwegian kids are coming through Mora. Look at Brandzik Nygaard. You look at Ludvig Lofton, I think, came from Mora. Who was drafted by Utah last year. This kid's 4 days away from being eligible for the 26th draft. And you look at his game, and obviously he's been in Sweden now for a few years. Played for Malmo last year and for Tabi HC. Obviously struggled in Malmo, but found his groove on another team in the under 18 level. Now playing under 20s and finding his groove still in that level. But a bigger kid, I've seen this kid skate, and I would honestly say he's closer to 6'4". One of the bigger kids I think that's eligible for this draft. 6'4" and probably about 200 pounds. Not a lot of eyes on this kid. I would assume that the likes of a Håkan Anderson or somebody is looking at this kid and putting them on their draft boards, because you don't teach that kind of size and have that kind of skating ability and then just be undervalued. There's more to his game that has to be unlocked, and I think he's a really good projectable pick. Harrison Smith now, another American player, started in the North American Hockey League this year, now playing at the USHL level for Youngstown. Another short kid, 5'8", 141. I think that's a little outdated. He's probably closer to 5'9", 5'9.5", and $160. You look here, a lot of assists at the NHL level, played for the Maryland Black Bears, 34 points in 35 games. And then now for the Youngstown Phantoms, has 2 assists in 3 games. This is a kid who, made the jump from the U18 level to, junior A hockey. And, again, people often mistake how hard that is to do as a young player. And find his groove. And there's just a lot to like here. He's already D1 committed to Sacred Heart. You look at what he's done here at the AHL level, 11 points in his last 5 games, clearly dominant at the North American Hockey League level. But there's a lot to like with him. I think there's just a good skill set with this kid. Really good cerebral hockey player. Very smart in terms of where he finds his game. And there should be a lot to like with Harrison Smith, as a later round guy or even a camp invite. This is a kid who really stood out to me at the 2A level. Pajus Prankskevich, Lithuanian kid. This is a guy who is obviously, this is like super sleeper territory now. We're talking with the last 10 guys. 5'7", $154, obviously a little bit smaller. But 10 points in 5 games at the 2A level was one of the leading scorers for them in the tournament. And then you look at what he's done at the under 18 and under 20 levels here. Those are not meek stats. Those are really impressive stats for a kid who's draft eligible. Obviously, Swedish juniors is a little bit different than the pro level. He would have to adjust to the pro level. There's still a lot of growth in his game. This is a very long-term project with a guy like Pajus Prankševius. I probably butchered your name. I'm sorry if I did. But there's a lot to like there with him. He's obviously you don't produce that level if you aren't a very capable player. And I think there's somebody to watch and be intrigued about. Ruben Vesterling, this is another guy, really dominant at the under 18 level, playing for Djurgårdens at the under 20 level right now. This is a kid who, again, not really on a lot of radars, 6 foot and almost 200 pounds, finding his game professionally right now. I think he's, now playing at the under 20 level. He's got a point in 9 games. Still a lot of work to be done, but if he can hit a really rapid ascension, I think this is a kid who could be a 6th, 7th round pick. He's a guy to certainly watch. I think there's more growth in his game still. You can clearly see he's way too good for the under 18 level. Just has to find his groove, and maybe that's moving to a different team at the under 20 level, maybe moving to somewhere where he can have a more impactful role. But there's just more to learn and grow from a player like Ruben Westerling, and it should be really interesting to see what he's able to bring to the table eventually. And then, a few other players here. Michael Azzaroni has now played at the North American Hockey League level, playing for Springfield. He's been closer to a point per game. Another guy who is going to find himself at the D1 ranks at some point in time. Another player I really like. Dovydas Yukna just signed a contract actually in Switzerland. This is a kid who will find himself at the pro level next year. We can look at his profile here. Another Lithuanian kid as well. They're growing as a market. A lot of their kids are moving on to Sweden and Switzerland to further develop. I actually have a video here about emerging hockey countries. If you guys have not seen that, do yourself a favor and click onto it. I think it's really interesting to watch and see their growth and their development as well. But this kid's a big star for them in Lithuania right now. One of the more relied upon players. Huge kid. He's 6'3" and 190 pounds. Already played at the under 20s now for a few years. 28 points in 37 games at the under 20 level, and then 7 points at that tournament as well with teammates with Pajus Prankševič. This is a kid who is a bigger kid, obviously 6'3". Scouts are going to look at that. He's obviously gotten some time at the pro level as well by playing in the Champions League. There's some real skill and real potential out of this kid. He's a definitely guy to watch and look at going into the rest of the time here. Move on to a few players I'm going to mention here. The SO5 born and Denis Novogursky has found himself now playing pro hockey in Slovakia. Dominated at the under 20 level now for the last couple years. Obviously an older player, obviously a smaller player. You can see here, obviously, has gone on, played a couple games at the tier 2 level in Slovakia, 2 points against pros, really impressive. And then it's gone on to play at the top league in Slovakia, which isn't anything you shake your head at. Just hope he gets a little bit more time there. I think he's clearly too good for the under 20 level and needs to find himself in some pro environments. So going into some other players as well, the last few I'm going to mention, and then I'm going to go ahead and take any questions anybody's interested in hearing about or anything like that. few more players I'm going to mention here. Roberto Leonardo Henriquez. This kid is super undervalued right now in the scouting world. Dominican and Slovakian dual nat. He just got a contract here with Green Bay literally today. I'm going to go ahead and share him here. 6'1" and 190 pounds. 160 pounds. This is a kid who his crease movement is some of the most impressive crease movement I've seen in a young prospect. Super agile, really good post to post, very acrobatic, very athletic, not afraid to battle for pucks. This kid's a warrior, man. Like every level he's played at, he's won. Really impressive in terms of what he's brought to the table. You look at his statistics here: 17-5, played in Slovakia as well, 12-8, 15-2, 25-7. Look at the low goals against here. Internationally, he's represented really well. Really stood out at the Ivan Holenka tournament as well. Wasn't the starter to start the tournament, but came on and played a couple games late and had very impressive showings against many of the draft eligible players. Currently unranked in all the ranking platforms so far, which is very, very surprising. Not even a lot of independent scouts know who this kid is. So this is a super, super sleeper in my opinion. Absolutely a candidate to get drafted. Absolutely a guy who, after the first couple goalies, I would take this kid. I think he's that good. I think he will project to be a National Hockey League goalie. Just has to find the right development coach, needs to find the right opportunity and situation. This is a kid I think will fit into the D1 scheme. Will eventually play college hockey, in my opinion. Just a super, super, super likable prospect. You root for him, and undersized. He is everything you could want out of a player that is very rootable and a sleeper. Non-traditional hockey player, playing in a new environment, has come to North America and been seamless. Just a super, super impressive player. And then a couple more guys I'm going to mention here. Bryce Vitala. This is the one kid who actually he's the guy who was in the thumbnail for the stream tonight. This is a kid out of Holy Family Catholic. Played a lot of high school hockey in Minnesota. To me, he's the best kid out of high school in Minnesota right now. A lot of people in Mason West thought of as being a really interesting player just because he's a dual athlete. To me, this kid is the best kid in Minnesota in terms of high school hockey. I think he has proven it time and again. He's a bigger kid. He's 6'3" and 195, 200 pounds. Watching his games, super streamlined, great hands and tight, super offensively gifted, has a lot of skill and potential. There's just a lot to like with a player like Bryce Vitala. And then Anthony Alain Samake. I was looking on the list here and realized I didn't have any defensemen. This is your sleeper defenseman for this draft. A little bit shorter at 5'9". Well, actually, he grew. So he's about 6 foot and 170 pounds. I've caught him in many levels. Caught him at the USHL level. Caught him at the under 18 level. This is a kid who's a very good breakout. He's kind of a breakout machine. Great skater, super agile. I thought he was super, really good at running a power play if needed. Elusive skater. Acceleration is very, very good. Never makes a mistake defensively. Very good with gaps and maintaining a stick and keeping spacing very nice and tight. A great first pass. Just a lot of really good projectable things to the National Hockey League. And, a younger kid, obviously only 5 days away from being a 26 draft eligible. I think he would have benefited probably from being a 26 draft eligible. But definitely a candidate, I think, to go in the first 3 rounds. And then 2 other guys I'm going to mention here before I take questions. Daniel Rodness. This kid last year didn't play at all. So he skipped a whole year of hockey. Previous year played at the under 20 level in Sweden. And then this year came back. I don't know if he had a major injury or what the deal was. Those that may know probably could comment below if they have any information on it. But he's gone and he's played really, really good at the the under 20 level in Sweden. You look at his game here. He obviously didn't play the whole year. Has improved even more so. 43 points in 27 games. Definitely somebody to watch and look at in terms of a really good comeback story. Obviously another Norwegian-born player. I think Norway is a very undervalued class this year. I would expect, at the very least, that a couple of the guys I mentioned earlier will be drafted. I think Michael Eriksson will be drafted. Like Strami Vatne will get a look. And then obviously the other Norwegians I mentioned, I think should get looks. But it's just really impressive to watch their growth and see what's happening. But really impressive player and a guy who you don't normally see in these drafts. And then finally, one other player I'm going to mention is Pavels Nikitins, another Latvian kid, another kid who's got an interesting story as well. Playing in the German league last year, he played at the tier 2 of the under-20s in Germany, dominated there. Is now playing at the top level and playing just as impressive. That's the kid who, a lot of people have candidates like, Justin Wilhoft, the Grieva twins, different players that are looked at as being guys to be drafted out of the DNL, and nobody's really talking about this kid. So, he's short. He's 5'8" and 150 pounds. That's probably why he's not getting looked at. But you can't ignore the production. I don't think you can ignore the skill either. There's just a lot to like with a player like Pavels Nikitins. So I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to go back now, looking at the total summary of the players on my list here. I'm going to go ahead and scale it out a little bit. So you see here, obviously, a lot of different players in the Western Hockey League, a lot of USHL players, a lot of Swedish players, non-traditional hockey players in, Norway and Lithuania, Slovenia, and, the Russians, I think, are, a couple of those Russians are pretty undervalued. Just a lot to like here. There's just a lot of different sleeper picks that I don't think a lot of people know about. Or if they do, they're being ignored right now. I just wanted to get into these prospects as well. I don't see any questions, at least on the stream. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them on the side here. I'd love to talk about it. But in terms of my overall thoughts with the class, like I said, there's a ton of really interesting sleepers that I think are eligible. These are different prospects that, again, a lot of people are not mentioning, in the scouting community. And if they are, they're very hush-hush about it. You obviously have, I'd say probably the top. There's probably about half of these guys have actually been mentioned on a lot of mocks. But there's other guys on this list who probably likely won't get drafted, but should get looks. So just depends on, who's watching, who's really paying attention to these kids, what their opportunities are, who their agents are. It really is going to depend on that type of stuff. So, with that being said, if you are watching this after the fact and you have any questions, comments, anything you guys want, feel free to leave them as you're watching the video. Feel free to leave them and I'll respond to them. Really appreciate those that have been on here. Obviously, I'm over 200 subscribers now. Greatly appreciate you guys that have gone on and watched. If you are new to the channel, please do yourself a favor. Please subscribe for more content like this. I'm going to be doing more short videos on non-traditional hockey countries. I'm going to do a couple highlight reels. I have a Matt Schaefer reel that's going to come out here shortly. I have a couple other guys that I'm going to put out reels for, probably Roger McQueen one and maybe a Victor Eklund one. And, I'd love to talk more hockey with you guys. If you can, please do yourself a favor. Subscribe on Instagram. Subscribe, follow me on YouTube. Do everything you can. Just spread the word. I really want to grow this community to really make it, more than just a couple hundred people and, maybe have more than a few people on stream here. But at the very least, if you could share the content, that'd be greatly appreciated. With that being said, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you on a future video. Bye.